Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to stand on the extensive protocols already established by the MCs. And let me just say, all protocol observed. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this, the 32nd Annual General Meeting of the African Export-Import Bank, holding in the nation's federal capital territory of Abuja, a kingdom founded by Babacar in 1828, and has been positively impacted by the experiences of some of the illustrious sons of this land, including Shehu Shagari, the man credited with the city's infrastructure development, as well as Chief Olusegun Obasanjo and Murtala Mohammed, the brains behind the development of the new capital. Indeed, it is our honor to host you as part of the bank's 2025 annual meetings and associated capacity and knowledge sharing events. These annual meetings have become pivotal in generating ideas, shaping policy design, and changing the narrative, while at the same time creating a platform for forging constructive partnerships and strategic alliances. Accordingly, we expect the outcome of these meetings in this great city to have consequential impact and alter the development trajectory of our continent. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly go back to the history of Afreximbank's formation and the journey it has taken thus far. I think some of you will remember that the years leading to the formation of Afreximbank were turbulent, underpinned by global sovereign debt crisis, while elevated Afro-pessimism contributed to a mass withdrawal of trade and development finance from the continent. I want to remind us that the establishment of Afreximbank was Africa's response to the confluence of crises during that time. But the establishment of Afreximbank was also met with fierce resistance, both from within and without Africa. It was those whose goal it was to perpetuate the culture of dependence and underdevelopment of the continent who led such resistance. Notwithstanding the fierce opposition to its creation, Afreximbank has ascended into systemic relevance, supporting not only its clients but member countries and contributing to the continent's development aspirations. Over the past 3 decades, the resilience of the bank has been anchored on courage and determination, clear foresight, and a firm belief in its vision. It is against this background that the 2025 annual meetings are aptly themed, Building the Future on Decades of Resilience. Some of you may ask why this theme. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, 3 decades after its establishment, the very combined forces drawn from both within and without Africa that opposed the creation of the bank in the lead up to its establishment have changed into various shapes, but with the sole objective of undermining this great institution. The theme also was influenced by the ongoing global development as the world continues to experience waves of global shocks with significant implications, especially for developing and vulnerable countries. Thus, this clarion call to look within and take our destiny in our own hands. An emerging fractured world characterized by heightened geopolitical tensions, economic fragmentation, and realignment, increasing protectionism crystallized by trade, tariff wars, blatant disregard of rules-based multilateral trade, and heightened trade uncertainty is exacerbated by the withdrawal of aid from the continent. Accordingly, the certainties of the past, stability, predictable alliances, and open markets are giving way to a new era of fragmentation and volatility. thus creating a scenario that led to the establishment of Afreximbank. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, so how do we navigate the headwinds associated with this emerging new world order? The experience of Afreximbank, and indeed the continent over the past 30 years, gives us optimism. Having exhibited resilience in the face of adversity, we can leverage Afreximbank's experience to chart a path for the future. Africa is at the crossroad, at a point where we need to be intentional about our aspirations, firm in our convictions, resolute in our actions, and determined in our collective purpose. We have arrived at a point where we need to harmonize our collective strength, be firm and resolute in our conviction in addressing our challenges and shaping the future. I put it to us that strengthening African institutions, especially development financial institutions, is critical for sustainable development, democratic governance, and improved livelihoods. In an area where there is scarcity of funding for African institutions, our own homegrown institutions must be given all the support that is required. We must focus on building strong independent institutions, promoting good governance, and fostering regional cooperation. It is imperative to highlight that institutional strengthening also requires political support from our political leaders, so as not to undermine our own institutions. Prudent policy and reforms, including macroeconomic management, structural reforms, and investment in key areas such as infrastructure and human capital across the continent, are crucial for fostering sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to be deliberate about industrialization with a view to promoting value addition to Africa's exports. Whilst diversifying the continent's export basket, efforts must also be directed at diversifying export destinations. We must improve regional trade through AfCFTA. We need to forge new trading partnerships and strategic alliances to leverage our collective strength and resources. New partnerships and strategic alliances will contribute to enhancing access to new markets, offer competitive advantages, and increase innovation. The African Export-Import Bank will continue to stand by and support member states to advance their short to medium-term goals, as we have done in the past. During the end of the commodity supercycle, we came in with a counter-cyclical facility. During COVID, as already been mentioned, during the Ukraine crisis of 2022, we intervened by introducing innovative instruments to support member states. In this way, member countries were able to mitigate the impact of these shocks. We have supported the continent's industrialization by establishing industrial parks and special economic zones, in addition to support capacity expansion of large private sector corporates. Again, to address the outflow of scarce foreign currency and medical tourism, we completed the first Africa Medical Center of Excellence here in Abuja. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world is enveloped in a cloud of uncertainty, Afreximbank will be there to support the continent in its aspirations. As Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, once said, "Those who would judge us merely by the heights we have achieved would do well to remember the depth from which we started." As an institution and a continent, we continue to face adversity through challenging global economic order. However, we can look into the future with optimism, knowing that we have been here before and we have prevailed. I wish you all fruitful meetings and deliberations, and hopefully we leave these meetings more resolute than ever to champion the cause of our destiny and for the prosperity of future generations. Please let me also take this time to urge you to explore the beautiful city of Abuja in your spare time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dennis Denya. Thank you very much. Now, I'm back home here. I'm a Niger man myself, and I'm proud. I love my country, and I understand and recognize those people in government. They don't have an easy job. It's a hard job, but it's so vital. And we have a few of those people here today. And there's one person in particular, actually two people, that I really want you to give a round of applause for, because the work they do is vital to the success of this great nation we call Nigeria. Please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Wale Edun, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But he's not alone, Mr. Edun. You're not alone. You're not working alone. You're working in partnership. Yeah, because one of your key partners is here today. Now, through bold reforms, unifying exchange rates, boosting investor confidence, this next speaker has championed policies that strengthen trade and business, making Nigeria a very attractive destination for global and Pan-African investment and growth. So give a warm round of applause as I welcome the remarks of the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, His Honorable Olayemi Cardoso.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government from across our great continent and beyond, Your Excellency Kashim Shettima, GCON, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by Tokpe Fasua, who is the Special Advisor on Economic Matters. Honorable ministers, in particular the Minister of Finance, the esteemed former presidents and prime ministers, distinguished statesmen and women, Your Excellency Professor Benedict Orama, the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of African Export-Import Bank. And I also want to make a special recognition of the past presidents here present. Although I can see one, Mr. Edodu. And I don't know if Jean-Louis Ekra is also here. Aha, he's sitting next to me. And in our typical Nigerian way, I would like to crave indulgence to adopt the very extensive protocol that has already been established. Now, let me say that it is a very, very great honor and privilege for me to be here today to deliver the opening remarks at this year's annual meeting of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, with the overarching theme, building the future on decades of resilience. Permit me to begin by congratulating the bank on its 32nd anniversary and to commend the President, Professor Orama, and other members of the Board of Directors, as well as the entire Afreximbank team, for its unwavering commitment to the transformation of the continent's economic landscape. This continues to inspire hope, confidence, and concerted action. The theme of today's session, 32 years of resilient growth and transformation, could not have come at a more auspicious time. It speaks directly to the essence of this institution and the road of travel of our continent. Today, we gather to reflect on and celebrate the journey of Afreximbank over the past 3 decades. Afrexim has emerged as more than an average financial institution. It has become a trusted partner, a convener of ambition, and a catalyst for change, shaping strategy, enabling execution, and elevating African agency across the globe. Distinguished guests, it has already been mentioned that Afrexim was born in Abuja in October 1993. The founding mandate, may I say, was bold and transformative: to finance, promote, and expand African trade at a time when global financial institutions were retreating from our shores. The visionaries, and we're happy to have some of them here today, who midwifed its birth, understood that Africa required a dedicated institution rooted in the continent and responsive to its peculiarities to unlock its latent potential in both intra-African and global trade. Over the last 32 years, Afrexim has grown from modest beginnings to become a symbol of African financial fortitude. From an initial capital base of $750 million, relatively small amount by international standards, the bank has expanded its capital assets to over $40 billion US as of the end of last year. This remarkable trajectory reflects both prudent financial stewardship and the continent's growing confidence in its capabilities. It is also a testament to the expanding coalition of stakeholders spanning 51 African countries and a mix of public and private investors who have placed their trust in Afreximbank's position. Besides its impressive financial results, Afreximbank achievements have been both wide-ranging and deeply strategic. It has distinguished itself as a reliable counter-cyclical actor and first responder during crisis. The bank has repeatedly risen to the occasion when Africa needed it most. Again, the former speaker, the senior vice president, had actually mentioned a number of interventions that Afrexim had done on the continent, from the COVID-19 pandemic, Patimfa, to, of course, the counter-cyclical trade liquidity facility and its immense contribution directly to the Africa's public health response. These interventions collectively underscore a profound truth that Africa's economic resilience is inseparable from its capacity to provide solutions to its challenges. The Afreximbank, as a truly African institution, has distinguished itself by embodying this ethos. Ladies and gentlemen, as a country, Nigeria provides a reflection of the impact and potential for strategic partnerships with Afreximbank. A founding member and a major shareholder, Nigeria is also the bank's largest single beneficiary. Earlier this year, the president and chairman of the board noted that Nigeria has received approximately 52 billion in trade and project financing over the past decades, mirroring both the size of our economy and the depth of engagement with Afreximbank. Ladies and gentlemen, while we celebrate these accomplishments, it is imperative to recognize the persisting and emerging challenges facing the African continent. Rising trade protectionism, global economic fragmentation, and shifting geopolitical dynamics are not only undermining Africa's developmental prospects, they are also threatening the coherence of the international ecosystem. Therefore, the role of Afreximbank has never been more crucial in addressing these challenges. The last 32 years have affirmed its credential as a bulwark towards volatility, a catalyst for intra-Africa trade, and a champion for integrating Africa into global value chains. As we reflect on today's sub-theme, 32 years of resilient growth and transformation, we must also ask a forward-looking question. What does it take to build an African institution that stands the test of time? Resilience is not accidental. It is engineered through deliberate choices, strong foundations, and a mindset oriented towards the long term. First, it takes strategic foresight, the ability to look beyond the noise of the present and invest in solutions for the next decade, not just the next quarter. Resilient institutions are always thinking ahead. Second, it requires crisis preparedness. Institutions that survive and thrive are those that plan disruption before it arrives. They build buffers, diversify risks, and maintain discipline, especially when others are distracted by short-term gains. Third, clear communication is essential. In moments of uncertainty, people follow clarity. Resilient institutions speak honestly, act transparently, and stay close to their stakeholders, particularly when the road is rough. And finally, none of this can work without robust systems and governance. Great ideas cannot succeed on weak foundations. Resilience demands sound decision-making processes, strong data, functional infrastructure, and the humility to learn and course correct along the way. At the Central Bank of Nigeria, we've made this work a priority in the past year. We have focused on rebuilding trust with markets, with citizens, and with partners. We recognize that institutional credibility is the anchor of effective monetary and financial policy. Our efforts are focused on restoring clarity, reinforcing consistency, and deepening confidence, not as an end in itself, but as a foundation for a resilient future. This, to us, is the essence of institution building. However, resilience alone will not suffice. To secure the future that we envision, we must foster greater strategic cohesion among African member states. This includes accelerating the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, deepening regional integration, and building robust engagement with the African diaspora. And I must say that I am particularly pleased and want to commend the very hard work of Afreximbank under the leadership of Professor Orama in redefining the meaning of diaspora, redefining the meaning of diaspora. The African diaspora does not just reflect the African continent, but it reflects those outside of the African continent that are indeed the diasporans all the way to the Caribbean. And I see great work that has been done there by the Afreximbank in reaching out and forming partnerships, which definitely mean a lot to those they are reaching out to and to those of us here on the African continent. So I really do want to commend them for that. Also, to tell everybody that as the Central Bank of Nigeria, we recognize the need for diaspora engagement and participation in building a strong and resilient domestic economy. As part of our ongoing policy reforms in the foreign exchange market to boost diaspora remittances and support Naira stability, we have introduced two financial products, namely the non-resident Nigerian ordinary account and the non-resident Nigerian investment account, designated to serve Nigerians living abroad. This initiative is expected to provide a secure and efficient platform for managing funds investing in the Nigerian financial market. This would harness the economic potentials of Nigerians in the diaspora by boosting remittances and fostering investment in critical sectors of the economy. It is therefore imperative for initiatives such as this to be embraced to ensure that Africa and its diaspora continue to act in unison. And let me say also that for us, this particular initiative is certainly going to be a game changer. And people will now begin to understand a lot better how Nigeria is diversifying its revenue base and its reserve base. So please watch that space. Looking forward, as we celebrate 32 years of Afreximbank's remarkable impact, we must also turn our eyes to the future. A future that calls for even greater ambition and clarity of purpose. A future defined by green growth that is African-led and African-owned. By digital transformation that connects our people and our markets, not just to the world, but to one another. By food and energy sovereignty that shields our nations from external shocks and secures our developmental pathways. And by a dynamic private sector that drives opportunity, innovation, and inclusive prosperity at scale. Afreximbank has helped us dream big. Now it is time to deliver big. Let us commit to building the resilient institutions our people need, our economies require, and our continent deserves. And let us live here today not only inspired by the past, but united in the work that lies ahead. Before I finally take my leave, I think I would not be doing justice to not leave you with a particular thought, and especially since I have the platform and I will use this as the opportunity. You know, a recent study by the Harvard Business School on leadership came up with a conclusion that two very critical factors for success in leadership: strategy and execution. Strategy and execution. And many times you find leaders have one and don't have the other. And they came out with a statistic which actually showed that barely 8% of leaders have both strategy and execution. So in actual fact, you could argue that in some environments and in some companies, they have none. They have none. And that's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge. You know, I spoke earlier about dreaming big, thinking big. And I put out a challenge to say we also must see how to deliver big. I want to use an example that I am very familiar with. Many years ago, and I would say perhaps about a decade ago or so, the president of the Afreximbank, Professor Orama, who is someone I have known, went through relatively challenging times on his health. And this is something that is pretty well known. And he was able to surmount those challenges. he was able to surmount those challenges. And as a result of surmounting that, he made a promise to himself and to the hundreds of millions of Africans. And that promise was to ensure that he brought a first-class health facility to the continent. Believe me, at that time, and I remember this very well, it appeared as an outlandish dream. How can that ever happen? And dare say, in the journey, I witnessed certain experiments they had tried to do, which failed. And honestly, I was extremely delighted when a couple of weeks ago, the realization of that big, bold, and audacious dream came to light through the launching of the Africa Medical Center for Excellence. A center that has been created in conjunction with King's College London, a very well-reputed household name in the field, and is also determined to replicate this in other parts of Africa. Professor Orama, I salute you. It is not many that have the fortune of making these big dreams come true. It is not many. And I'm particularly pleased that as you exit your 10 years of leadership at the Africa Export-Import Bank, you have been able to realize this dream. I wish you all the success as you go on to do greater things, continue being a dreamer, and actualizing your dreams. We thank you for your years of service to the African continent, and I personally will say to you, keep dreaming. Thank you very much.
Restoring trust, inputting clarity, building the pillars necessary for Nigeria's success. Another warm round of applause for Olayemi Cardoso, the Central Bank Governor of Nigeria. Wonderful way to get us started. I see that there are many of your colleagues, as I said, Governor. I see our sister, Dr. Doris Uzoka Anite, the Honorable Minister of State for Finance, is also with us. And one thing that's wonderful about Afreximbank and about President Orama's nature to pull together. You know, Nelson Mandela said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And he has done something I think that is quite remarkable really in Africa. He's not gone alone. He's pulled together multilateral finance institutions, like-minded individuals. You'll hear from one in a moment. But I also actually noticed my eyesight. I'm wearing my good glasses today. I think I see over there AFDB VP for Private Sector Infrastructure and Industrialization, Organization, my brother Solomon Koino, I think, if I'm not mistaken, over there. Just an example, AFC, AFDB, and many others coming together as a collective force is quite remarkable and is exactly what we need. Now, on to our next speaker. He's representing Honorable Kasil Ato-Ba Forson, who is the Minister of Finance for Ghana, and he's also the chairman of the annual general meetings of shareholders. Please welcome, representing him, the Honorable Thomas Ampem, who is the Deputy Minister for Finance of Ghana.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, permit me to associate myself with the extensive acknowledgements that have been done by earlier speakers, and to proceed to present a brief remarks on behalf of the Ghana's Finance Minister, Dr. Kasil Ato-Forson. It is with great honor and a privilege to welcome you all to the vibrant city of Abuja, Nigeria, for the 32nd annual meetings of Afreximbank. Allow me to first express my deep appreciation to the government and people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for hosting this important gathering and the warm hospitality extended to us. Secondly, to Afreximbank for the excellent organization and coordination of this AGM. On behalf of the government and people of the Republic of Ghana, I say thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the theme for this year's meeting, Building the Future on Decades of Resilience, captures the very essence of our shared African journey, our collective fortitude, and the vision that will drive us forward. For decades, our continent has weathered storms of every kind, from economic shocks, health crisis, climate disruptions, political uncertainties, to global market shifts. And yet through all this, Africa has proven again and again that it is not only resilient, but deeply resourceful. We have adapted, we have innovated, and we have found strength in unity. This resilience, deeply rooted in the spirit of our people, is the foundation on which we must now build the future. And build we must. We envision an Africa that is economically integrated, industrially robust, digitally connected, and climate resilient. But this vision will not come to life by chance. It requires deliberate design, strong partnerships, and bold leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where institutions like Afreximbank have been a pillar in our shared journey. Since its founding in 1993, the bank has stood beside African nations, not merely as a financier, but as a true development partner, helping to reimagine what is possible in African trade and transformation. Efforts in enhancing intra-African trade, supporting small and medium enterprises, and fostering industrialization have yielded tangible benefits for our economies. Initiatives like the Pan-African payments and settlement systems are fast dismantling barriers to cross-border trades, while strategic partnerships are ensuring that African businesses remain competitive on the global stage. We have seen the fruit of our labor in growing trade volumes across the continent, in the empowerment of women entrepreneurs, and the increasing participation of African economies in global value chain. These successes are not endpoints, but rather stepping stones towards greater achievements. Of course, these achievements did not come without challenges. Global financial architecture, as it stands, does not always favor the developing world. Yet institutions like Afreximbank provide African solutions to African needs, tailored, timely, and transformational. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the future of Africa is as bright as the challenges we are willing to overcome. We stand at the crossroads of immense opportunities and formidable obstacles. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area presents a historical chance to unlock the full potential of our markets, uniting 1.4 billion people under a single economic framework. With the right policies and investments, we can achieve unprecedented economic integration and prosperity. Yet, we must be candid about the challenges that lie ahead: climate change, geopolitical tension, youth unemployment, and ever-increasing need for infrastructural development demand urgent and concerted action. The resilience we speak of today must be coupled with innovation, collaboration, and relentless pursuit of solutions that are both inclusive and sustainable. Your Excellencies, as we gather here in Abuja, we do so at a critical inflection point. The global economic landscape is evolving rapidly, and Africa must continue to chart its own course, one rooted in self-belief, integration over isolation, production over dependence, and collaboration over fragmentation. This week, let us make the most of our time. Let us not only reflect on what has been achieved, but more importantly, let us imagine and design what is possible. Let our conversations be honest, our ideas bold, and our actions decisive. The future we envision is not a distant dream, but a tangible reality within our grasp. Thus, if we dare to reach for it together. As chair of this year's annual meetings, I am excited for the outcomes that will emerge from our engagements. I am confident that with shared purpose, mutual respect, and visionary leadership, we will continue to build a stronger, more connected, and more resilient Africa. Let us honor the resilience that brought us here by committing ourselves fully and collectively to shaping a future that reflects Africa's full potential. In closing, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to once again express my profound gratitude to the government and people of Nigeria for hosting us in such warmth and hospitality. Abuja, with its dynamic energy and rich heritage, is a fitting backdrop for this momentous occasion. To all the delegates gathered here, your presence is a testament to the collective will and enduring spirit that drive our continent forward. Once again, welcome. Welcome to the 32nd Afrexim annual meetings, and welcome to the dawn of a brighter, more resilient Africa. Let the work begin. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen, for Deputy Minister for Finance of Ghana. And as we proceed, I would like to acknowledge Deputy Prime Minister of Egypt, Abdallah, here representing His Excellency, the President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah Saed Hussein Khalil El-Sisi. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to you. Mesdames et messieurs, ce que vous allez découvrir à présent va bien au-delà d'un film institutionnel classique. Parce que Afreximbank, ce n'est pas une banque classique, c'est un moteur, c'est une énergie qui accompagne, qui transforme, qui propulse le continent africain vers l'avenir. From one sector to another, from one border to the next, Afreximbank initiatives are turning challenges into real opportunities and vision into concrete results. This is the story of a continent rising, of a sovereignty that is built, not declared, one intervention, one innovation, one partnership at a time. We invite you now to witness the impact in an impactful video.
If I took you back to the Afreximbank of 10 years ago, we were focused, but I bet you nobody imagined the scale we will be at today. In 2015, we were a team of 450. Today, we've got 1,000 people on the mission of transforming this continent.
The bank has grown enormously.
People are put together by passion and a love for the continent.
Growth for us isn't just about strategy. It is leadership. It takes trust. It takes true partnership and belief in our abilities to actually make a difference.
Transforming initiatives that were concepts to reality.
The scale and pace with which we've been moving at has been with purpose. Every new office, every new hire, it's all been part of our bigger mission. The trajectory that this organization is taking is one that will ensure that we continue to achieve greater heights.
The creation of the bank itself was a response to a crisis at that time.
There are moments where this continent has needed bold, counter-cyclical support. That's when we show up. When the pandemic hit, we moved quickly to ensure the continent acquired the vaccines that it needed.
Within 3 days, we were able to put together a product paper deploying the intervention through financial institutions, through central bank, through corporate, through small and medium-sized enterprises.
That ensured that trade continues to flow for our different economies. And when we did that, global partners stood up and joined us. The MasterCard Foundation, the World Bank, UNICEF all joined us.
The bank demonstrated utmost level of relevance to the continent.
This has been a game changer that has poured and changed the narrative.
So there's a level of confidence now that allows us to become the trusted partners to governments to make sure we act decisively.
We can't just solve the problem by talking about it. We actually have to sit and craft solutions.
Back to the initial days of this organization, when we disbursed $5 million to support the cocoa sector in Ghana, to today, when we've disbursed over $5 billion to help the Nigerian National Petroleum Company to transform itself. These aren't symbolic. What we are doing is financing transformation at scale. We're channeling capital into trade, infrastructure, supply chains. It's not just in the long term when there are unique moments or crises. That is when the impact is real. We continue to grow stronger and faster, but never leaving behind our core goal to serve Africa and Africans.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a warm round of applause to two people. I mentioned him before at the beginning, but he's right here in the room. The Honourable Terence Drew is with us, Prime Minister of St Kitts and Nevis. And also His Excellency Hassan Abdallah, the Governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, is here with us. Now, Africa, as you've seen, as you felt, stands at a threshold of a new era, an era defined by ambition, by innovation, by investment, and by unity. Now, with a combined balance sheet exceeding $70 billion, the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, or AMFI for short, is a real powerhouse. It's bringing together the continent's most dynamic financial engines to drive transformative development. Now, leading this impressive organization, having recently succeeded President Orama, who was the inaugural chairman of AMFI, is another visionary leader dedicated to advancing Africa's development through uniquely African solutions. As President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, AFC, Mr. Samaila Zubairu has pioneered transformative financing initiatives that have unlocked billions of dollars for essential infrastructure across this continent that we love. So, please join me in welcoming a true architect of Africa's future, Mr. Samaila Zubairu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to stand the clearly established protocol today. Our gracious host, my dear brother, President Benedict Orama, honorable ministers here present, I would like to call out our Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, who gave us a mandate to do the domestic diaspora bond, which our governor talked about recently. And this transaction was awarded a prestigious award last week in London at the Europe, Middle East and Africa Awards. Speaking to the idea of having vision and to finding ways to domestically enhance our resources. Distinguished guests, all protocols observed. It is a pleasure to gather with you today as we celebrate 32 years of impact by Afreximbank, an institution that has not only stood with Africa and the African diaspora in times of crisis, but has actively shaped our continent's path to resilience and transformation. Let me commend the board, management, and staff for the successful organization of this AGM, and above all, the past presidents who have been acknowledged here, and the entire team for wonderful organization. I also want to commend Professor Orama for his visionary leadership and unwavering dedication to Africa's progress during his tenure as president of the bank. Under his stewardship, Afreximbank has become more than a bank. It has become a pillar of African self-reliance and a first responder in moments when others hesitate. At the Africa Finance Corporation, we are proud to have traveled alongside Afreximbank on this journey. Together, we are building the Kano-Maradi rail line, strengthening regional integration and activating the promise of the AFCTA. We are together building the African Medical Center of Excellence. We together build several projects across the continent. More importantly, we are focused on one of the most important things that would turn around our future and prosperity on the continent. We are together building transformational projects that will move and transform Africa's commodities and produce to finished and processed goods for use within the continent and outside the continent. We have been working together on the Arise Integrated Industrial Platform. First, they were lenders to the project, and then they eventually became equity partners alongside us. And we're finding ways to strengthen that partnership and to do more across the continent, especially here in Nigeria, where we have a new ambition of trying to transform the textile sector in the country. Again, we're focused on how to create more jobs because we believe jobs are the most important parameters of success for growing economies. So the more jobs we can create together, the better a future we can leave for the next generation. This partnership extends beyond collaboration. It demonstrates a shared mission to realize the Africa we want. I would like to stand here before you today as the chair of the African Multilateral Financial Institutions, AMFI, established by African heads of states and the African Union Commission in February 2024. AMFI unites Africa-owned and Africa-controlled multilateral financial institutions that have been built by Africa for Africans to deliver the Africa we all want. Alongside Afrexim and AFC, our growing membership includes the TDB Group, Africa Re, ATD, Shelter Afrique Development Bank, ZEPRI, East African Development Bank, Africa Solidarity Fund, and FEDER. And I'd like to announce that last week here in Abuja, AFDB mentioned that they want to join AMFI, and so that's a big plus for us. Together, AMFI members manage a collective balance sheet exceeding $70 billion. And with the addition of AFDB, you know what that will look like. It will be almost at the $200 billion that the public development banks in Africa collectively manage. But the opportunity and responsibility before us is far greater. Our most recent State of Infrastructure report indicates that Africa has over $4 trillion of domestic capital pools. The interesting thing is that over $1 trillion of that is in non-banking assets. That means with the right regulatory reforms and structured intermediation, we're able to channel a big proportion of these funds into the infrastructure that will enable industrialization, create jobs for our people, build the infrastructure that ensures connectivity for Africans and trade amongst Africans. We are keen to observe that we have over $405 billion in pensions, mainly in South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Egypt, Kenya, and several other countries. We have over $314 billion in insurance assets. We have over $150 billion with the sovereign wealth funds. These are African resources that must be mobilized and deployed at scale to meet our own trade, infrastructure, and development needs. As I've always said, Africa's development must be owned by Africans and it must be financed by Africans. I would say that one of the first meetings I had with Professor Orama when I first became the president of AFC, in fact, he was actually the first person to send me a letter of congratulation, and he engaged me then on how we could work together. One of the things we agreed upon was that we must take ownership of our development and we must lead in the execution of that ownership. And that means working together to do projects. That means working together to mobilize resources, as we have done. That means working together to deliver the promise that Africa needs. That is why, under the leadership of His Excellency President João Lourenço, the chairperson of the African Union and president of the Republic of Angola, and in close partnership with other NEPOD, we are activating the AU Development Fund, a new platform to bridge critical financing gaps to accelerate delivery of Agenda 2063. As the world becomes more fragmented and nations increasingly turn inwards, Africans must look within to look forward. Find solutions for our development challenges. The era of reliance on external benevolence is giving way to one of self-determination, and this is the new reality. African multilateral financial institutions are more critical than ever. We are significantly policy important because we have demonstrated that without us, most things would not happen on the continent. So it's important that we continue to work together to advance development and accelerate development impact for our people. We understand the terrain. We are invested in the outcomes. We have skin in the game. Our African multilateral financial institutions are not only technically capable, they are ideologically aligned with our shared ambition to transform Africa. Our fates are intertwined. To do better for our people is not a mission, it is a necessity which must be realized. Recognition of the policy importance of these institutions, African governments have invested their capital, signed enabling protocols, and enacted legislations necessary to make African multilateral development banks fit for purpose, impactful, and efficient. This partnership demonstrates the shared vision and the aspiration of the people of Africa, and is aligned, enduring, and responsive. We must therefore empower these institutions as the first point of call to channel domestic capital into Africa's development priorities and to lead our economic resilience and renaissance from within. In closing, I call on all of you to work with African financial institutions to ensure that we remain resilient and that we work together to strengthen African financial institutions and not join the fray in attempts to weaken African multilateral financial institutions. And we do that by really respecting the laws of our respective countries, where we have already empowered these institutions with the immunities and privileges that's required for them to continue to de-risk opportunities in their domestic territories and to mobilize capital at scale for development within the continent. Africa's prosperity demands that we invest in our own resilience. This we rely on through our institutions, and we must act with urgency and unity in shaping our economic destiny. This is the purpose of AMFI. This is the work we must now accelerate. So I call upon our governments, our regulators, and our private sector leaders and our institutional investors. Stand with us. Work with us to deepen our capital base. Support us in strengthening our credit ratings. Empower institutions to lead where others cannot. Africa's financial architecture must be robust, integrated, and sovereign, because only then can we seize our moment in history. Let us build Africa together. Let us build our future together. Congratulations once again to President Benedict Orama for your amazing stewardship of Afreximbank and all that you've achieved with your team. Thank you for your friendship, your vision, and your enduring commitment to achieving Africa's full and dynamic potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Samaila Zubairu, President of AFC. AMFI is clearly a game changer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a special moment as we honor an enduring icon of African finance and vision, Dr. Babacar Ndiaye, former president of the African Development Bank and a pioneer of African-led development. Now, he championed the creation of key institutions like Afreximbank and Shelter Afrique, and his unwavering belief in Africa's potential continues to inspire us and inspire generations. So please enjoy this message from the past. It's a tribute to a true African champion.
En vérité, le succès que nous avons remporté en créant l'Afreximbank, compte tenu de tout le scepticisme qui a entouré cette entreprise, m'a fait proclamer dans ma déclaration prononcée lors de la première Assemblée générale en 1993 à Abuja, qu'Afreximbank est sans doute un modèle unique de développement d'un partenariat constructif, fondé sur une base multinationale, et qu'il est un véritable triomphe à la gloire de l'imagination, de l'intellect et de l'esprit africain. Où peut-on trouver une autre organisation internationale créée sur la base d'un accord passé entre différentes nations souveraines, mais appartenant à un grand nombre d'institutions et de personnes du secteur privé, et fonctionnant comme une entreprise à but lucratif et sur la base de principes commerciaux sains. À ce titre, Afreximbank est un exemple. Comme certains d'entre vous ici présents le savent sans doute, le chemin parcouru entre la vision exprimée dans la déclaration inaugurale en 1985 et la création de l'Afreximbank en 1993, en passant par l'autorisation reçue en 1987, fut long et tortueux, nécessitant, comme je l'ai déjà annoncé, du tact, de la diplomatie et du pragmatisme pour naviguer entre les obstacles qui jonchaient le chemin. I will at this juncture also like to mention an emotional dimension and inspirational factor that played an important role in shaping our bank. In May 1993, I visited South Africa at the invitation of ANC and the then government of South Africa, as they were preparing for multiracial rule. Visiting Cape Town and seeing the status of Cecil Rhodes, a man credited with a dream of linking Cape Town to Cairo through a road network, I was inspired to work towards a translation of that dream into a noble pan-African reality through the work an African Afreximbank will do in the promotion of trade from Cairo to Cape Town and vice versa. Above all, Afreximbank's support to inter-African trade will play a crucial role in the promotion of African regional integration. In this regard, the specific operation responsibility of the Afreximbank are not ends in themselves. They have broader purpose to enhance Africa's standing in world trade. Beyond its purely financial mandate, therefore, Afreximbank will be expected to act as a forum for collective action in a wider multilateral framework, giving Africa more weight in global trade negotiations than could be arranged by any one country or a small sub-regional grouping of countries.
You know, Marie-Angèle, we are so blessed in the next 3 days with some incredible champions of Africa convening. It's going to be quite a remarkable who's who. Now, I know I did protocol before at the beginning, but I feel the urge to just do it again, because there are so many people here today. You've heard me mention many names, but I'd just like to very much welcome the representatives of global African presidents here present and former presidents. I know that His Excellency Namadi Sambo is with us, I believe, who is the former Vice President of Nigeria and a very strong advocate for Afreximbank's work. You're most welcome, sir. Heads of governments from global African governments, and also our Caribbean friends and family are here. You'll hear from someone in a moment that very much fits that description. Representatives of His Excellency the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Kashim Shettima, is here. The former presidents of global African countries, former vice presidents of global African countries. I mentioned before our dear leader, Professor Benedict Orama, president and chairman of the board of directors of Afreximbank, ministers of finance and coordinating ministers of the economy, and Nigeria itself, the host of the 2025 Afreximbank annual meetings. The chairperson of the African Union Commission is represented by Her Excellency the Deputy Chairperson, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat in Ghana, ministers and representatives of global Africa, including African and Caribbean, central bank governors. We heard from Nigeria's central bank governor here, and we know that Egypt and many others are here with us today. There are ambassadors, there are members of the diplomatic corps, there are former presidents of Afreximbank here, senior government officials, senior global African government officials. We heard from Mr. Samaila Zubairo from AFC. There are board members of Afreximbank Group. There are royal, regal fathers, kings here present today. There are senior executive vice presidents and the executive vice presidents of Afreximbank, captains of industry, friends and partners of Afreximbank. I should stop now, shouldn't I? I think I've said enough. Okay, thank you. You're all welcome.
Thank you. Francophone areas. And I think looking at him made me realize that his dreams are not behind us, they're ahead. So, c'est à nous aujourd'hui de porter ses rêves encore plus loin. I'm switching back to French. Mesdames et messieurs, nous poursuivons ce moment d'échange avec une intervention qui est très attendue, parce qu'elle est empreinte de vision et d'engagement. Vous savez, c'est un honneur pour nous aujourd'hui d'accueillir une voix qui est résolument engagée et depuis de nombreuses années en faveur d'une unité toute particulière, l'unité caribéenne et africaine. Cette fraternité que parfois on oublie. Un leader dont l'action s'inscrit pleinement dans les ambitions portées par Afreximbank pour notre région. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming His Excellency the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, Prime Minister for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. A warm welcome, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
As I took the flight from home to travel here, I looked out the window. The skies were beautiful. The Atlantic seemed clear. I reflected on my ancestors who came across in ships, but I also reflected on the fact that there were hardly any other aircraft in sight. There and then I said to myself, there's much work that has started, much work to do, so that one day the air traffic from Africa to the Caribbean would be as busy as other regions in the world, as the flying time is pretty much the same. Let us not doubt ourselves, for it was Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and I think that we all know who he is, a propagandist of Africanism, who is and who was, I would say, the national hero of Jamaica. And he said, I trust that you will so live today as to realize that you are masters of your own destiny, masters of your own fate. If there's anything you want in this world, it is for you to strike out with confidence and faith in self and reach for it. He further said, to take advantage of every opportunity, and where there is none, make it for yourself. And Afreximbank embodies this adage. Where there was no opportunity, Afreximbank has created for us and for itself. Put your hands together for the Afreximbank. Let me, of course, recognize all of the excellencies who are here, esteemed colleagues, honored guests, but I especially want to recognize Orama. Put your hands together for him. He had gotten me here today to fly 8 hours just to spend 36 hours. So it tells you the deep respect that I have for this gentleman. Let me recognize, of course, all who are here in this room today. I thank you for coming. For this, for me, as a Caribbean leader, it means more than a gathering. It means that we are on a shared journey, a journey of prosperity. And so I relish this moment, one that I dare say is profound and personal. Ultimately, I am elated to stand before you here in Abuja, Nigeria, for the 32nd annual meetings of the Afreximbank. And I was just recently in this great city. So I bring warmth from your Caribbean brothers and sisters, and specifically from the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis, a region and a country not only bound to Africa by ancestry, but by aspiration, purpose, and now by bold and growing partnerships. Let me extend heartfelt congratulations to Afreximbank for reaching this milestone. 32 years of courage, resilience, and service to its people. 32 years of choosing vision over fear, action over hesitation, and competition and community over competition. From its founding, this bank has taken on a mission far greater than commerce. It has carried the burden of opportunity, building systems that empower African peoples and economies to chart their own course, to finance their own progress, and to trust their own. Institutions like this one answer their own questions about what is possible. That mission is still unfolding, and it is still as urgent as ever. Allow me to take a moment to pay special tribute to my brother and my friend, Professor Benedict Orama. Under your stewardship, Afreximbank has become more than a financial institution. It has become a living testament to what is possible when leadership is not only competent, but deeply conscious. You have expanded the horizon. You have expanded the horizon of what African leadership and institution building can mean. You have been both strategic and soulful, firm in your technical leadership, but also emotionally intelligent in how you have guided relationships, built trust, and told a new story about what Africa and its diaspora can build together. I speak of this not in abstraction, but from a place of deep personal reflection. When I met Professor Orama for the first time in 2022 in Barbados, just 1 month after taking office as Prime Minister, I was struck not only by his clarity of purpose, but his generosity of spirit. That meeting planted a seed, and I left with the firm conviction that the work of connecting Africa and the Caribbean was not just about speeches and symbolism. It was about systems. It was about finance. It was about reshaping the machinery of cooperation across the Atlantic so that it no longer simply echoed our history, but actively built our future. From that first conversation, it became clear to me that Afreximbank, under President Orama's leadership, was not simply welcoming the Caribbean into its orbit, it was embracing us as kin. That is why St. Kitts and Nevis was proud to be the very first country in the Caribbean to sign a memorandum of understanding through Afreximbank. That was not a diplomatic formality. It was a deliberate act of trust. A prime minister and a government, we believed in the bank's vision. We believed in his vision. And we took a step not just on behalf of our country, but on behalf of the entire CARICOM region. That step has proven to be one of the most impactful and future-facing decisions we have taken in recent years. It is also why, above the desk in my office, hangs a painting, a gift from Professor Orama. And I see it every day. And I do not just see the art. I see a reminder that partnership is built not only on contracts, but on character. That beyond the bureaucracy of intergovernmental relations lies something that is far more powerful. Those things are relationships, trust, shared identity, shared accountability, and shared ambition. That is why today, as we gather under the theme, Building the Future on Decades of Resilience, we must remember that resilience alone, though critically important, is not enough. Resilience is what carried us through colonization, through exploitation, through decades of underdevelopment, through decades of being shut out. And listen to the story of what brought the Afreximbank together, of course, pleads to this. But resilience must now be matched with reinvention, with the courage to reimagine ourselves as architects as we build our countries and economies together. That is where Afreximbank's true legacy lies, not only in what it has protected and built thus far, but what it dares to build in the future. Today, the Caribbean is no longer a distant observer to Africa's renaissance. We have become an active partner as the sixth region of the African Union. So thanks to the Afreximbank, we have moved from the margins to the center. The bank's establishment of a regional office in Bridgetown, Barbados, the first and only Afreximbank office outside of the African continent, was a political and spiritual gesture. It signaled to us that in the Caribbean, that we are no longer the forgotten family members of this great continent, but we are truly the sixth region of the Union. Since that time, the Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, ACTIF, has become the premier space for mutual engagement between our regions. ACTIF 2022 in Barbados, ACTIF 2023 in Guyana, and ACTIF 2024 in the Bahamas have collectively mobilized over $6 billion in new opportunities. And we look ahead with great anticipation to ACTIF 2025 in Grenada, where I am confident that more will be delivered. And dare I say that I also now look forward to ACTIF 2026 in St. Kitts and Nevis. But these meetings, these agreements, these events are not the end. They are the beginning of a new era, an era where African and Caribbean businesses co-finance tourism, co-develop climate resilience infrastructure, co-create fintech solutions, and co-author the story of what a truly global Africa looks like. Earlier this year, I led a high-level delegation from St. Kitts and Nevis to this great city, Abuja. It was a productive, affirming, and deeply meaningful journey. During that visit, we had discussions that spanned renewable energy, biotechnology, agriculture, creative economy, and education. Out of that visit came opportunities that are already being activated, including new project development frameworks and cultural exchange initiatives. And just this month, we were honored to receive an African delegation in St. Kitts and Nevis. That visit represented a physical crossing of a once tormented corridor, the Atlantic Ocean, that for centuries symbolized our forced separation. But this time, the journey was not one of sorrow, but one of solidarity. The visit breathed new life into our shared commitment to build a new bridge that I call the Atlantic Bridge, one made not of wood and steel, but of people, of parity and dignity. As Prime Minister, I've made it a core foreign policy priority to see Africa and the Caribbean to see Africa and the Caribbean not as two regions with occasional overlaps, but as one extended family with an economic, diplomatic, and developmental destiny that is interlinked. Under my upcoming chairmanship of CARICOM in January of 2026, I intend to lead missions of regional heads of governments back to the African continent. This will not be a courtesy call. It will be a declaration of intent, a commitment to further embed the Caribbean into the architecture of global Africa. And to those who may ask why now, I say because we cannot afford to wait. President Orama has taught us that. Because the world is changing fast. And because in this era of fragmentation, we must become more together, not less. Global supply chains are being redrawn. Financial institutions are recalibrating. Climate change is accelerating. And global equity remains elusive. In such a context, the greatest risk we face is not overreaching, it is retreating. It is remaining isolated. It is failing to connect the dots of our shared power as regions. Afreximbank, under the leadership of President Orama, has understood this better than most, not in words or ideas, but in action. The bank has not merely spoken about Pan-Africanism, it has invested in it. It has operationalized it. It has expanded it beyond continental borders to embrace the Caribbean, and in doing so, it has reminded the world that together, yes, we can. The Caribbean seeks partnerships. We seek access. We offer in return our creativity, our resilience, our market potential, our human capital, and our strategic location. Together, Africa and the Caribbean represent a dynamic economic and cultural bloc that the world cannot ignore so long as we do not ignore each other. As St. Kitts and Nevis pursues its sustainable island state agenda, an ambitious plan to transform our country into a model of resilience, green innovation, and inclusive development, we look to institutions like the Afreximbank and co-creators of a new development paradigm. We are actively advancing, therefore, geothermal exploration, transitioning our public health infrastructure, modernizing our agricultural systems, and rethinking our citizenship by investment program for national long-term sustainability. These areas are ripe for cooperation, investment, and innovation. So let me close, my dear friends, brothers and sisters, by offering this. Let this moment, this meeting, this year, not be remembered only as the 32nd annual meeting of the Afreximbank. Let it be remembered as the year when something deeper took root. The year when we crossed not just borders, but boundaries of imagination. The year when we decided together that global Africa was not an aspiration, but an institution. Let us walk forward not as scattered survivors of a painful history, but as architects of a powerful future. Let us choose union over hesitation. Let us choose vision over fear. Let us, together, choose to build the future we deserve. Thank you very much. And may our partnerships endure for our people, for our generation, and for humanity, for all of our prosperity. Thank you very much.
Wow. Global Africa is not an inspiration. It's an institution. Another round of applause for the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, the Prime Minister of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, representing the 6th region of Africa, as the African Union calls it. Now, to give the keynote, representing His Excellency Kashim Shettima, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We're so pleased to welcome, and please give him a round of applause, the Special Advisor to the President on the Economy, Dr. Tokpe Fashua.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as introduced, my name is Tokpe Fashua, Special Advisor to Mr. President on Economic Affairs in the Office of the Vice President. I'm here to read the speech of the Vice President strictly, but before I go on, let me say a special welcome to President Benedict Orama of the Afreximbank. You're welcome, sir. Your Excellency, Professor Benedict Orama, President and Chairman of the Afreximbank, Your Excellencies, past and present heads of states and governments here present, the Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Mr. Wale Edu, I think he just stepped out, Governor of the Central Bank, honorable ministers, captains of industries, distinguished delegates and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, and indeed the government and the peoples of Nigeria, I am delighted to welcome you all to Abuja for the 32nd annual meetings of the Afreximbank, Africa Export-Import Bank. This is more than a ceremonial gathering. It is a congregation of builders and believers. We gather under a theme that is both timely and profound, building the future on decades of resilience. And today's sub-theme, 32 years of resilient growth and transformation, invites deep reflection on where we've been, what we've endured, and more importantly, where we now aspire to go. Let me begin by expressing our profound gratitude to Afreximbank. Since its foundation here in Abuja in 1993, Afreximbank has grown from a regional trade financier into a continental development anchor. It has mobilized and disbursed more than $100 billion across Africa and over $52 billion to Nigeria, more than any other country on the continent. I'll take the applause. It's for the Afreximbank. In Nigeria alone, Afreximbank's transformative footprint include the African Trade Center, commissioned here in Abuja, which now serves as a nucleus for policy innovation, trade facilitation, and business intelligence. The African Medical Center of Excellence, which opened just weeks ago, providing world-class oncology, cardiology, and hematology services, and reducing the over $1 billion spent annually on medical tourism. The African Quality Assurance Centers in Kaduna and Ogun States, strengthening the export readiness of Nigerian products. A $300 million export manufacturing initiative strategically located in Cross River, Enugu, Imo, and Kano states to catalyze industrial clusters. And the pivotal $3 billion Intra-Africa Petroleum Trade Facility, enhancing Nigeria's energy security and supporting domestic refining capacity. These are not merely projects, they are strategic investments in resilience, in sovereignty, and in shared prosperity. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our administration is pursuing one of the boldest economic reform agendas in Nigeria's history. Because resilience is not passive, it must be planned, built, and protected. We have unified the exchange rate, eliminating multiple FX windows to restore transparency and investor confidence. We have phased out fuel subsidies, saving billions of dollars in leakages and reinvesting in social protection and infrastructure. We have launched a national compressed natural gas CNG transition plan, converting over 150,000 vehicles and reducing fuel costs and emissions. We have accelerated strategic infrastructure, including the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway and the Eastern Rail Corridor, to improve regional connectivity. We have transformed our oil sector, introducing real-time tracking of exports and enhancing revenue assurance through the Petroleum Cargo Declaration Scheme. And we have expanded access to trade finance and restructured support to small and medium enterprises through digitized platforms and AFCFTA-aligned export development zones. These actions, while difficult, are already yielding impact. GDP is expected to grow at between 4 to 4.5% in 2025, and I see the CME also nodding his head because he's pushing for 7%. Inflation is stabilizing, reserves are strengthening to circa $40 billion, and the central bank governor is here. Our economy is on a firmer, more diversified footing. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the past 3 decades have taught us that resilience is not just survival. It is the capacity to adapt, to lead, and to reinvent. Afreximbank has embodied this ethos. In times of global liquidity crunch, it provided emerging trade financing. In the aftermath of COVID-19, it rolled out the Pandemic Trade Impact Mitigation Facility, PATIMFA. Today, it is shaping continental policy through PAPS, the African Trade Gateway, Afreximbank, and its new concessional finance window. Now, as Africa faces the consequences of global fragmentation, commodity transition, and climate disruption, the challenge is clear. We must go beyond resilience to renewal. That means mobilizing blended finance to crowd in private capital for infrastructure and green transition. That means deepening regional value chains anchored in AfCFTA and powered by scalable industrial policy. That means institutionalizing digital trade systems such as PAPS and MANSA to cut costs and boost intra-African commerce. That means strengthening financial institutions like Afreximbank with new capital, governance frameworks, and risk-sharing facilities. And also, that means ensuring that transformation is inclusive, reaching our youth, our SMEs, and our women entrepreneurs. Colleagues and friends, the future is not something we wait for. It is something we must build. Let us seize this moment, the 32nd annual meetings, not just as a commemoration, but as a commissioning of new ideas, new instruments, and new coalitions for Africa's next chapter. Nigeria stands ready to lead, ready to collaborate, and ready to deliver. We will continue to work hand in hand and with Afreximbank to deepen our partnerships and align more closely with Africa's development agenda. In closing, let me again thank Professor Benedict Orama and the entire Afreximbank leadership for your unwavering commitment to Africa. To all our guests, our friends from across the continent and beyond, Abuja is your home this week. May your deliberations be fruitful, your partnerships renewed, and your ambitions for Africa enlarged. On behalf of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I hereby declare the 32nd annual meetings of Afreximbank officially open. Thank you very much.
Please join me in expressing once again our sincere appreciation with a warm round of applause. Mesdames et messieurs, nous poursuivons ce programme avec un moment fort. Le lancement officiel des rapports phares d'Afreximbank. Alors, vous le savez, chaque année, ces publications nous offrent des clés de lecture très précieuses sur les dynamiques commerciales, par exemple, et économiques qui façonnent le continent africain. To walk us through the highlights of the reports, I am honored to invite a respected economist and a strategic thinker, Dr. Yemi Kale, Group Chief Economist of Afreximbank. Ladies and gentlemen.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome once again to the 32nd Afreximbank annual meetings. Permit me to respectfully stand on existing protocols already established. On behalf of the board, management, staff of Afreximbank, it's my honor to present a very high-level preview of two of Afreximbank's most important flagship publications,
the African Trade and Economic Outlook report for 2025 and the African Trade Report for 2025. So why are these reports? So important? First of all, we are witnessing a world in transition. Global fragmentation is deepening. Protectionist policies are resurging. Multilateralism, once the bedrock of global trade is being tested, some might even say eroded. And for a continent whose development prospects are tightly interwoven with global trade and capital flows, these shifts carry profound implications. At the same time, Africa is contending with complex and compounding vulnerabilities such as high, sometimes unsustainable debt burdens, escalating trade, escalating climate volatility, fragile food systems, significant infrastructure gaps, and so on, which are all converging to constrain the continent's room for policy maneuver. However, within this challenging context lies an extraordinary opportunity to reset, to rethink, and to reposition Africa's development trajectory. So it's against this backdrop that we are presenting these flagship publications. I want to also stress here that these reports are not mere compendiums of statistics or conventional commentary. Rather, they are strategic narratives grounded in data and insight, and together they help us to make sense of a world in flux, and more importantly, to chart a course to it. The African Trade and Economic Outlook report for 2025, themed Africa's Resilience in a Changing World Order, offers a forward-looking macroeconomic perspective. It examines key trends in growth, inflation, debt, exchange rate dynamics, and trade performance. It also identifies looming risks and emerging opportunities, providing the analytical depth required for sound policy and investment decisions. On the other hand, the African Trade Report for 2025 focused on African trade in a changing global financial architecture, delves into the structural shifts reshaping global finance and trade. It also explores how capital flows, interest rate regimes, exchange rate volatility, and new payment systems are redefining the way African economies engage with the rest of the world and with themselves. In this light, both of these reports serve as more than tools for reflection. They are strategic compasses designed to convert complexity into clarity and insight into action. So they provide policymakers, investors, development actors, and so on with evidence-based options that align Africa's demographic strengths and resource wealth with integrated long-term strategy. They therefore represent roadmaps for navigating this increasingly multipolar and uncertain world and underscore a new phase of African ambition, one where the continent no longer reacts to global developments, but begins to shape them. Let us now drill down into some of the key messages from both reports, starting with the African Trade and Economic Outlook for 2025. The central theme here is that Africa is adapting. Despite a turbulent global environment over the last few years, including the COVID-19 pandemic, commodity price volatility, inflationary pressures, major geopolitical realignments, and increasingly disruptive climate events, Africa has shown and is showing a remarkable ability to adjust, recalibrate, and push forward. Despite a challenging 2024, the continent grew by 3.3%. This represents one of the strongest growth rates in the world. At the same time, Africa's trade rose by 13.9%, with intra-African trade in particular rebounding strongly, growing by 12.4%, thereby reversing the previous year's decline. This performance in 2024 was supported by stronger domestic consumption, rising investment flows, and enhanced trade integration, especially under the AfCFTA. And these were complemented by the consistent support by African multilateral financial institutions such as Afreximbank, which continue to play a catalytic role in financing trade and development. Looking ahead into 2025, despite new risks and emerging challenges, Africa's GDP is expected to grow by 4%, outperforming the global average. Notably, 41% of all African economies are expected to grow above 5%. Average inflation is expected to decline from about 19% to about 15% in 2025 compared to 2023, thanks to tighter monetary policy, price stabilization efforts, and easing supply constraints among many of our countries in Africa. Debt is also expected to improve modestly, with the debt-to-GDP ratio for Africa falling from 67.2% to 65% in 2025. Finally, African trade is projected to grow 5.1% ahead of global trade. Intra-African trade, importantly, is forecast to grow at 6.6% on average annually between 2025 and 2028. And this will be driven by the AfCFTA implementation, price stability, and Africa's green and energy transition agenda. However, the Economic and Trade Outlook report also identifies several critical pressure points: persistent inflation in many of our countries, growing debt complexity and refinancing risk, escalating trade wars among major global powers, increasing frequency and severity of climate-related shocks, and so on. But beyond identifying risks and providing forecasts, this report also provides a roadmap. It shines a light on where the real opportunities lie, such as opportunities to build resilient supply chains, diversify export bases, and scale up intra-African trade. This report also makes a compelling case, just like the central bank governor mentioned in his address, that resilience is not enough, but must now evolve into long-term sustainability. In other words, we must transform from merely surviving shocks to structurally transforming our economies. This means diversifying exports beyond primary commodities, deepening in industrial capacity and value addition, and investing in human capital, innovation, and infrastructure. Moving to the 2025 Africa Trade Report, it explores how the ongoing global financial fragmentation is reshaping the landscape of trade and what this means specifically for Africa's economic trajectory. At its core, the theme we chose for this year reveals a critical shift where Africa's capacity to trade and grow is increasingly influenced less by traditional barriers like tariffs and more by the evolving dynamics of global trade, such as how money moves across borders, how trade is financed, how payments are settled, and how risks are assessed and priced. Today, the architecture of global finance is undergoing rapid and complex changes. And these changes are characterized by fragmentation driven by multiple forces, including escalating sanctions regimes, rising global interest rates, volatility in the US dollar, and widespread de-risking practices by financial institutions. What makes this financial architecture changing is not just the economic cycles that we are familiar with. It is also the rise of multipolar financing institutions, the global push for de-dollarization, the emergence of alternative cross-border payment systems, and the intensifying debate over the reform of Bretton Woods institutions. So all these trends are reshaping the fundamental levers of trade, including access to capital, cost of borrowing, settlement mechanisms, and ultimately, Africa's ability to build resilient intra-regional value chains under the AfCFTA. It is also important to note that this rise of nationalism and neo-protectionism within the global trading system is in many ways a symptom of deeper systemic shifts, especially financial ones. So by engaging directly with the evolution of the global financial architecture, the African Trade Report is not just documenting symptoms, it is confronting the enablers and constraints of Africa's future trade capacity. In addition, new regulatory frameworks such as Basel IV are tightening credit conditions worldwide and raising the cost of borrowing. While the dollar's dominance remains significant, it faces emerging competition from other currencies. But African currencies largely remain marginalized in global trade settlements. A key outcome of this evolving financial landscape is restricted access to trade finance, particularly for our small, medium-scale enterprises, which make up over 80% of our businesses. The result is currency volatility, higher financing costs, and constrained trade potential. But this also presents a strategic opening. The report calls for building a resilient, Africa-centered financial ecosystem led by African institutions anchored in local currencies and aligned with the continent's priorities. Achieving this vision, however, involves several critical initiatives. Firstly, there is a need to strengthen African development financial institutions so as to close the estimated $120 billion trade finance gap that continues to limit African trade. And that trade gap is not simply a consequence of demand exceeding supply. It's also largely driven by structural constraints like the Basel IV regulatory impact I mentioned earlier, and systemic rating biases that disproportionately affect African financial institutions. To close this trade finance gap and build a sustainable foundation for intra-African trade, the report recommends focusing on 3 pillars: developing local currency financing solutions, innovating alternative financing structures tailored to Africa's unique market realities, and leveraging digital platforms designed to enhance efficiency and accessibility. Together, these initiatives lay the foundation for a sovereign and inclusive trade finance architecture that supports Africa's long-term growth. Secondly, the report advocates for expanding local currency settlement mechanisms through platforms like Afreximbank's Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, which will facilitate trade in local currencies with reduced foreign exchange risk and lower transaction costs. Already, we have 15 African central banks that are already part of the PAPS network. Thirdly, it is vital that African voices have a greater influence in shaping the global financial rules and regulations that impact trade finance. Fourthly, the report calls for deepening AfCFTA implementation beyond ratification to more enhanced trade facilitation. So both these reports therefore converge on 5 urgent imperatives. 1, deepen AfCFTA implementation. Secondly, reform the global financial architecture with Africa as an active agent, not a passive recipient. And this includes using our G20 seat to push for fair SDR allocation, credit rating reforms, and inclusion in global financing rulemaking. Thirdly, we need to scale Africa's DFIs, make them bigger, make them stronger, make them more effective. We need to invest in infrastructure, especially digital trade, logistics, and skills. And finally, we need to expand access to trade finance, including expanding the range of instruments so as to close the finance gap, especially for our SMEs and industrial clusters, so as to unlock industrialization. So what is Afreximbank doing in this regard? A lot of what we are doing has been mentioned already this morning. Over the next 3 days, we will hear a lot more of what we are doing. But permit me to mention just a few of the examples featured in this report. We are not just observing at Afreximbank, we are acting, and you have heard a lot of this already this morning. We are providing strong financial support with double-digit in loans and disbursements. In 2024 alone, we disbursed about $18.7 billion, supporting trade industrialization and resilience across the continent. We are building strategic platforms, PAPS, AFPay, MANSA, the AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, and various innovative finance platforms. We are advocating for Africa to have a seat, a say, and a stake in global decision-making, and in general, advocating for Africa's position globally. We are also helping to shape the architecture of African trade by investing through our funds for export development in key sectors like finance, creative industries, oil, healthcare, and so on. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, this is what engineering transformation looks like, backed by scale, by strategy, and sovereignty. Our agenda is to turn fragmentation into opportunity and resilience into prosperity. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, against this backdrop, it is my honor to respectfully invite the representative of His Excellency, the Vice President, Dr. Tokwe Fashua, the Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew, His Excellency, Mr. Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the FCFTA Secretariat, the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Olayemi Kadoso,
and youth in trade. Policy reforms are underway in many countries across the African continent to ensure that national economies are aligned with the objectives and the imperatives and the reform agenda that the AFCFTA presents. We do see change taking place. We do see, as the report that was presented just before this segment sets out, increasingly, trade amongst African countries is taking place within the manufacturing sector, which is precisely the objective that we seek to achieve. Nigeria, Africa's largest economy,